Good morning and welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in once again. And again, it's my pleasure to continue now with our reading and discussion of the book, The Papacy and the Civil Power by R.W. Thompson. We were talking about the new Maryland colony and how it was established within the territory claimed by the Virginians. Carved out of the Virginia colony, this Maryland colony, named after the Virgin Mary, became a Roman Catholic colony, the only one in the colonies. Roman Catholicism was the religion of the colonies, although the colony professed religious tolerance. And we must understand that this was only a temporary expediency. It was a means of survival. The fledgling Roman Catholic Church in America stood no chance if it began to extirpate and to annihilate the heretical Protestants in the colonies. The idea of religious toleration in the Roman Catholic Church is not tolerated. It defies Roman Catholic canon law. It defies all the decrees of the popes. It defies the decrees of the councils. It defies all of Roman Catholic history. It defies all Roman Catholic Church history. Roman Catholicism is built on a foundation of intolerance. And history bears that out more than words can ever convey. So this is very unique in the world, this Roman Catholic colony called Maryland, within the territories of the colonial Virginians, wherein religious toleration is a pretense. Nowhere else in the world was it a pretense, as this book so clearly demonstrates. Now, we'll continue by backing up for continuity again. Page 680, the first full paragraph, if you're following along. It says, thus, when all these facts are taken into account, the conclusion is a natural, if not unavoidable one, that the insertion of the provision in favor of religious toleration in the Maryland Charter was alone for the objects and purposes already suggested. In other words, it was just a temporary expedient. It was a necessary concession, a necessary but temporary concession, with the hope in view that eventually Roman Catholicism could grow to a controlling status in the United States, and then all pretenses of religious liberty, freedom of religion, religious toleration could be thrown aside, and the government could be taken over by Roman Catholics, and then religious intolerance put in its place. The imposition of Roman Catholic canon law and the requirement that heretics or Protestants and liberals and schismatics, non-Catholics, should be extirpated and annihilated. Consistent with canon law, with the decrees of the popes, and all the history of the Roman Catholic Church. Let me just start out by repeating that the American Roman Catholic Church is unique in all the world of Catholicism. Nowhere else, nowhere in the rest of the world where Roman Catholicism resides is religious toleration preached. It's only here in America, and only for a time. Now, he continues, he says, so far as Lord Baltimore himself was concerned, it was absolutely a necessity with him. He did not take it in that form because he favored religious toleration in a broad and liberal sense, even if he did so favor it, but because it was the only mode by which he could maintain Roman Catholicism in opposition to the existing law of the Virginia colony. By precisely the same process of reasoning as may have influenced him, Pope Pius IX is in favor of religious toleration in the United States, but not at Rome, and so with his hierarchy all over the world. So here, R.W. Thompson expresses in his eloquent way that the Roman Catholic Church in America is unique in all the Catholic world. Religious toleration is propounded, at this period of time at least, in the colonies. Religious toleration is propounded by a Roman Catholic colony. It's not so anywhere else in the world. Now, the second Lord Baltimore did not accompany his colonists to America. He stayed in England and said they were placed under the care of Leonard Calvert, his brother, who arrived in Virginia with 200 Roman Catholics in 1634. They visited Jamestown, where they were notified by the governor and the council that their grant was considered an encroachment upon the rights of Virginia. They then sailed up the Chesapeake and established a colony which they called Maryland in honor of Henrietta Maria, the Roman Catholic Queen of Charles I. Now, some will assert that this is that I have made an error in that Maryland was named after Henrietta Maria, the wife of Charles I, but that it was named after the Virgin Mary. You have to understand that Henrietta Maria was named after the Virgin Mary. So the assertion holds that Maryland is named after the Virgin Mary. Now, upon Kent's Island, near the present city of Annapolis, they found a settlement of Virginians already made under the authority of the Virginia Charter. They demanded of these that their jurisdiction and authority at Kent's Island should be immediately recognized. So these Calverts, these Roman Catholics, were imposing that they should be recognized. And it says the Virginians, not consenting to this, which they considered an invasion of their colonial rights, hostilities were commenced. Their leader was seized by Calvert and his party, tried and convicted of sedition and other crimes, and would doubtless have been executed if he had not succeeded in making his escape to Jamestown, where he demanded the protection of the governor, who was then Sir John Harvey. So these Catholics set about doing what they always did, persecuting Protestants. And the leader of the Virginians had to seek refuge with the governor. Now it says no effective steps were taken by him, that is the governor, and he was suspected of favoring the views of the king and of Calvert also. On this account, he became so odious to the Virginia colonists that he was removed by the General Assembly and sent back to England. But he was restored by the king, who was not disposed to listen to any popular complaints or to do anything to protect the Virginians. Now, you might think this is incredible, that the Protestant government of Britain would not protect the Protestants of Virginia. But remember, the Virginians had offended the government of England by establishing its own assembly. And the king felt threatened by that. And he was ready to give over his preference for Protestantism to the Catholics if the Catholics would be loyal to him personally. Now, the facts thus far stated may be found in the general histories of those times, but any careful student of them will readily perceive that many things are omitted that are necessary to a perfect understanding of the early history of the Maryland colony, especially insofar as religious toleration was concerned. One reason for this is found in the fact that hitherto it had been deemed inexpedient by Protestants to permit the claim of Roman Catholic toleration to go unchallenged, as there was nothing to be gained by controverting it, and its evident tendency was to keep alive that sentiment in the minds of the multitude of Roman Catholic laymen to whom it is most acceptable. In other words, it wouldn't do any good to bring up the old feud that existed in England, because the only thing that resulted from that was civil war. So as long as these Catholics were peaceable, it was better for the Protestants not to question the Roman Catholics' attestation, temporary as it was, pretended as it was, of religious liberty. Okay? It would only mean war and conflict. Now it says, but now, when this claim is set up with such apparent candor, and so much is demanded on account of it, it has become necessary that it shall be more particularly examined and accurately understood. And it is fortunate that we're not entirely without the means of doing so. In 1655, soon after these events occurred, there was published in Westminster Hall, London, an account of the settlement of the Maryland colony, wherein it was shown, by facts and arguments which could not easily be overthrown, that the patent of Lord Baltimore was illegal, and that under it the younger Lord Baltimore had usurped royal jurisdiction and prerogatives in violation of the laws and liberties of the English nation and of the just rights of the Virginia colonists. In order to demonstrate this, a relation was given of the leading incidents connected with the rebellion of the Roman Catholic colonists against the existing government organized under the Virginia Charter. Some years ago, this account, along with many others connected with our colonial history, was put in an accessible form by a gentleman who, during his life, was greatly esteemed for his erudition, as well as for his painstaking in collecting together the materials of our early history. From this source, the facts now to be related have been obtained. After speaking of the seizure and confiscation of vessels belonging to the Virginians who had been trading with the natives of Maryland for a number of years, under proper and legal authority derived from their colonial government, and the invalidity of the Maryland Charter, which it was alleged Lord Baltimore had obtained by falsely representing the country as unsettled, it thus speaks of the Roman Catholic colonists. Quote, and professing an establishment of the Romish religion only, they suppressed the poor Protestants among them, and carried on the whole frame of their government in the Lord Proprietary's name. All their proceedings, judicature, trials, and warrants in his name, power and dignity, and from him only, not the least mention of the sovereign authority in England in all their government. To that purpose, forcibly opposing oaths, judged illegal in a report made by a committee of the Council of State in 1652, imposing oaths to maintain his royal jurisdictions, prerogatives, and dominions as absolute lord and proprietary, to protect chiefly the Roman Catholic religion and the free exercise thereof, and all done by yearly instructions from him out of England, as if he had been absolute prince and king. So they swore all their allegiances to Calvert, not to the king. Now, in any other normal situation, this would be treason. And it says, and also remember this, the King of England was incensed that the Virginians seated their own parliament without consulting him. But here we have an entire colony calling itself Catholic, doing everything in the name of Calvert, Lord Baltimore. Now, he continues, he says, there's no difficulty in seeing the object and precise nature of the oaths prescribed by Lord Baltimore for all officers and citizens, when it is considered that both by the laws of England and those existing in the colony at the time of his settlement, the English Episcopal was the established church. Okay, so this even violates the Church of England. Okay, which the king is supposed to defend, right? So the king should take immediate action against these Roman Catholic colonists for daring to defy the Church of England, or to usurp or supplant the Church of England in the Maryland colony, and especially when it was done within the confines of the original Virginian colony, a Protestant colony. And it says, while the practice of religious toleration was compulsory, being provided for in the Charter, it is undoubtedly true that these oaths were especially designed to give undue preference to the Roman Catholic colonists, a preference destructive of the equality which the Charter was designed to establish. This is one of the requirements. Quote, and I do further swear I will not by myself, nor any other person directly, trouble, molest, or discountenance any person whatsoever in the said province professing to believe in Jesus Christ, and in particular, no Roman Catholic, for or in respect of his or her religion, nor his or her free exercise thereof within the said province, so as they be not unfaithful to his said lordship, or molest or conspire against the civil government established under him, unquote. R.W. Thompson says, we must necessarily look to the character of the civil government established by Lord Baltimore in order to ascertain the obligations imposed by this oath. The oath of fidelity to him, Lord Baltimore, required that he should be acknowledged, quote, to be the true and absolute Lord and proprietary, unquote, of the colony, that, quote unquote, true faith should be rendered to him, that is, Lord Baltimore, and his heirs, and that his and their, quote, right, title, interest, privileges, royal jurisdiction, prerogative, propriety, and dominion over, unquote, the colony should be maintained. Here was a manifest attempt to substitute his own royal power for that of the king, to whom all the original colonists were ready and willing to pay obedience. But the same is further shown by the commissions, writs, and processes that were issued. The law of England required all these to issue in the name of, quote, the keepers of the liberty of England. In other words, in the king's name. But in disobedience of this requirement, they, that is the Roman Catholic colonists in Maryland, were issued in his name, Lord Baltimore's name, a clear usurpation of royal jurisdiction and dominion. The plan of government constructed by means of these usurped powers and prerogatives became such that Protestant inhabitants of the colony who were loyal to England could not conscientiously take this oath because it imposed the obligation of violating the law of the mother country. Whether that law was right or wrong is not now necessary to be inquired into. It was in accordance with the spirit of that, though not of the present age. it prescribed the line of duty for all English citizens, whether at home or in the colonies, and these Maryland colonists, by violating it, would have been subjected to prosecution for sedition and treason. All this Lord Baltimore knew perfectly well, and therefore he prescribed an oath of fidelity to himself of such a nature that a loyal Protestant could not take it, being well assured at the same time that the Roman Catholics would all do so. And to show the little favor he was disposed to exhibit toward those who should refuse, if indeed he did not design to drive out the Protestants entirely, he caused a proclamation to be issued to that effect, quote, that all such persons so refusing shall be forever debarred from any right or claim to the lands they now enjoy and live on, unquote. That is, their property should be confiscated, and, quote, his lordship's governor, unquote, was instructed, quote, to cause the said lands to be entered and seized upon to his lordship's use, unquote. So does anybody recognize this for what it is? This is the imposition of Roman Catholic canon law. The extirpation of Protestants and the confiscations of their lands to be used by Roman Catholics in whatever way they see fit. And that's what's about to happen in this country from shore to shore and from border to border. Okay? This is how the Roman Catholic colony got its start in Maryland. By confiscating the properties, the estates of non-Catholics, and simply stripping them of all their possessions. Open religious persecution, open religious intolerance, the imposition of Roman Catholic canon law, the extirpation, annihilation, and extermination of heretics, and the confiscation of their properties. Right down the pipe, full compliance with Roman Catholic canon law. Where's the pretense of religious liberty now? Okay? It was just simply platitudes, oral platitudes that came from the slippery lips of the Roman Catholic colonists. It was for appearances. It was a temporary expedient, but when everyone's back was turned, they persecuted Protestants right in their own colony. That's why to this day I don't go by what a man says with his mouth. I go by what he does. Judge a man by his fruits, not by his words. These colonists, these Roman Catholic colonists, committed treason against the legitimate king of England and against the legitimate authority in Virginia and the legitimate authority in the Maryland colony as well. And Lord Baltimore was treated as though he were the king of Maryland. He was Roman Catholic. And they set right out persecuting and prosecuting Protestants. True to their faith, true to their popes, true to their canons, and true to their councils, and true to their history. Bloodshed, persecution, theft, murder. And now it's going to be on a national scale. We'll be right back after this.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, Don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org. The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Okay, welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update, which is brought to you by FirstAmendmentRadio.com. So, if you appreciate the information you get here and are led of the Lord to do so, please make your financial contributions to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And for my part, please say a prayer in my behalf for protection and provision as I continue in the Lord's service. Now, during the break, has it dawned on anybody, any of my listeners, what is really going on here? Why is Lord Baltimore being allowed to act like the King of Maryland in defiance of the current king in England? I'll tell you why. Because just as King James I, his son and successor Charles I, was a professed Protestant, but he had secret Catholic leanings. And Charles I was going to do something in the colonies, particularly in the Maryland colony, that was going to defy his public profession of Protestantism. There was going to be open persecution of Protestants in the Maryland colonies, in the Roman Catholic Maryland colony. A colony that professed religious liberty was going to persecute Protestants. And Charles I didn't want his name and his reputation as a Protestant to be sullied by it. So he simply allowed Calvert, Lord Baltimore, to be in his little surrogate, to take whatever blame, whatever bloodshed of Protestants that would ensue, to be placed on Calvert's hands and not his. That he could maintain his Protestant, that Charles I could maintain his Protestant profession and not come under Protestant criticism in England. Now, these are my beliefs and my assertions. You're entitled to your own. But somebody has to explain why Calvert was able to just run roughshod all over the laws of England and all over the crown of England. with his dealings in the Maryland colony. Why was there allowed in a colony that professed religious liberty? Why was there open persecution of the Protestants, and why was it not corrected by the king? Now the author continues. He says, as might well be supposed, the results were just what Lord Baltimore designed they should be, and are fully set forth in this tract. Quote, Papists and priests and Jesuits, unquote, flocked into the colony. Quote, Papist governors and counselors dedicated to St. Ignatius, that is the founder of the Jesuit order, unquote, filled the offices. The Protestants were, quote, miserably disturbed in the exercise of their religion, unquote. A number of, quote, illegal executions and murders, unquote, occurred. There were, quote, imprisonments, confiscations of many men's estates and of widows and orphans, to the destruction of many families, unquote. Those who would not take the oath were disarmed and plundered. Let me read that again and see if it, rings a bell with anybody in the listening audience. Those who would not take the oath were disarmed and plundered. You don't suppose in the wings we have a new oath to be taken. Do you know it? I don't think I've been in an assembly anywhere since my at the latest my junior high days when I've said the Pledge of Allegiance in this country. It's just simply been done away with. When I was a kid, you walked into the classroom first thing in the morning. When the bell sounded, everybody rose, put their hand over their heart, and pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. But we don't do that in this country anymore. Could it be that there's no longer going to be liberty and justice for all, and that there might be waiting in the wings a new oath of allegiance being prepared for American citizens, and that we too will be disarmed if we do not pledge that oath? It took place in the Maryland colony. It said there were imprisonments, confiscations of many men's estates and widows and orphans, estates of widows and orphans, to the destruction of many families. You think that might happen in this country? I can tell you from reading my research, Caritas and Veritate, Rerum Novarum, and other papal encyclicals are directly calling for that very thing. The confiscation and redistribution of many men's estates, even those of widows and orphans, and the destruction of families in this country. It's already happening right before our very eyes. Nobody can deny this. Nobody who is aware of current events in this country can deny one word that I've just said. It's happening in the here and now. It says popish officers were appointed, outing those who were previously in office. Do you see popish officers occupying the most powerful seats in Congress? Do you see a professing Protestant and a professing Muslim? He can't really make up his mind what religion he wants to profess, but do you see a papist in the White House? Oh, yeah, he professes all religions. He's an ecumenical mutt. He's a spiritual mutt. But who does he serve? Never mind what comes out of his mouth. Who does he serve? Who does he obey? What do his fruits reveal? That he serves the Pope. Okay? All my listeners, Tom, he's a Muslim, he's Islam, he's this. Who does he obey? It doesn't matter what religion you profess in the New World Order so long as you obey the Pope. Remember John Paul II went around all the world and visited all the so-called religious leaders of all the world, even the Satanists and it even outraged his own church. There's many Roman Catholics criticized Pope John Paul II for his ecumenical hobnobbing with all the great pagan religious leaders of the world. So it doesn't really matter what religion you profess in this world, as long as you obey the papacy. He's extending his temporal power all over the world. But we have papist officers in our government, and they out those who don't serve the Pope. It says lands and plantations were seized and confiscated. We're going to see that in this country. We already have seen it. You know how it began? It began with the destruction of the family farm. I live here in Iowa. And when I was a kid, corporate farming had already gotten a great foothold, and the local family farms were being gobbled up by the thousands in this country. Now big corporations, most of them foreign-owned, now farm all the land of this rich Iowa state. They've confiscated the lands. It no longer belongs to the hands of Iowans. It doesn't support Iowa families. The Iowa farmers have had to go to town to get a job working for a slave master who also obeys the Pope. Lands and plantations were seized and confiscated, and it cannot fail to arrest attention that all these persecutions were visited upon Protestants, while not one Roman Catholic suffered from them. As for these, they were so favored that if one of them was called papish priest or Jesuit or Jesuited priest, etc., the offender forfeited a penalty of 10 pounds. You can't criticize the Pope or his papists without incurring a fine. You know, the same thing is said of Islam. And, of course, that's all the talk in this country. Oh, we have to fight the Muslim horde. We can't have Sharia law in this country because non-Muslims are taxed beyond their ability to pay. Look what happened here. Right here in Protestant America, in a Roman Catholic colony, the only Roman Catholic colony in all the colonies. If you accuse somebody of being a Jesuited papist, you were fined 10 pounds. That's Sharia law. It's called Roman Catholic canon law. It says the inferior position occupied by laymen in those days should relieve them from any responsibility of these measures. The civil authority of the colony was entirely in the hands of those appointed by Lord Baltimore, who, as it appears, selected Roman Catholic agents exclusively. Okay, it was a top-down hierarchical government seating Catholics only in the government. At that time in England, the papists were chiefly under the influence of the Jesuits, whose vigilance was too sleepless to permit this opportunity of planting their society, the Jesuit order, in the New World to escape them. How far they had the sympathy and support of Lord Baltimore is, of course, not known, but it is undoubtedly true that they were the authors of all these measures in the Maryland colony, and that they had pretty much their own way there. And let me interject at this point that the Jesuits were under attack in Europe, and they were plotting to dummy up their suppression and extinction. They were under tremendous pressure in Europe to get out of civil affairs. The Catholics in Europe were outraged about the Jesuits. They demanded Pope Clement XIII to suppress them. He attempted to and was assassinated. Eventually, Pope Clement XIV did issue his bull of extermination of the Jesuits, and they killed him. They poisoned him as well. 2 successive popes, in turn, took their shot at suppressing the Jesuit order. But look what they're doing in the colonies. Look what the Jesuits are doing in the colonies. There's no interference of what the Jesuits are doing in the colonies. Lord Baltimore was behind shipping the Jesuits to this country, already hiding Jesuits from the upcoming outrage against the Jesuits in Europe. Okay? You've heard many researchers and historians tell how the Jesuits found refuge in Russia during their suppression. They found refuge right here in colonial America as well. And they were busy about their Jesuit purpose, and that was to exterminate and to annihilate Protestants. He says how far they had the sympathy and support of Lord Baltimore, these Jesuits, of course, is not known, but it is undoubtedly true that they were the authors of all these measures in the Maryland colony, and that they had pretty much their own way there. Okay? So we can just think of Maryland as a Jesuit colony. And what's going to happen in a Jesuit enclave? Protestant persecution and the preference of Catholics. And it says, this appears from a narrative preserved in the Jesuit College at Rome, which is also found among the historical tracts above referred to. It was prepared by the Jesuit fathers appointed by the Superior General of the Order at Rome to superintend the first emigration of Roman Catholic colonists who left England in the fall of 1633. That's right, we're talking now specifically about the expedition of the Ark and the Dove, which we read a book that dealt specifically with it by J. Moss Ives entitled The Ark and the Dove. In 1633, the first shipment of Roman Catholics to the colonies began from England, the Isle of Wight, in 1633, and on board were at least 2 Jesuit priests. One of the names was Andrew White, which I assert the White House is named after. Okay? A lot of people are going to roll their eyes. Where'd you get that, Tom? Common sense. Just plain common sense. Out of reading this history and knowing the power that they had in Maryland, knowing that they founded the most prestigious university in this country, Georgetown University, that they have 28 of the most prestigious universities in this country, that the land that the Capitol building now rests was donated by the Carroll family, that John Carroll was the first Jesuit bishop in this country, the influence that the Jesuits had in the Maryland colony and the setting up of our own government simply makes it a no-brainer. The White House is named after the first Jesuits set foot on this shore in the Maryland colony, to establish the Maryland colony. That was Andrew White. Now, many are going to argue, that's fine, let them argue, but my assertion remains firm. The White House is named after Andrew White. And someday, I believe, they'll confess that fact. As this country more and more becomes Catholic, as Protestantism is more and more suppressed and persecuted, as they are stripped of their property and their lands and their rights, as they are executed and extirpated, eventually it'll come out as an admission that the White House is named after Jesuit priest Andrew White. History will bear me out. Now he says they went, as it is declared, the Catholics and the Jesuit priest upon the Ark and the Dove in its expedition to the colonies. He says they went, as it is declared, to, quote, carry the light of the gospel and of truth, where it has been found out that hitherto no knowledge of the true God has shown, unquote. That is, where neither the Pope nor popery had been heard of. History has amply shown the kind of light they throw upon the pathway of nations as well as individuals, and the events in the Maryland colony show that they acted there as everywhere else under instructions from Rome. Quote, bulls, letters, etc. from the Pope and Rome, unquote. that is, from the Pope and the General of the Jesuits, became familiar to the colonists. By means of these, the Jesuits became omnipotent in the colony, and in the tract last named, they show how successfully they exercised their power. Then, as now, the first object of the order was the acquisition of wealth, with the right to govern and control their property without any reference or obedience to the laws of the country in which they reside. On this subject, here he is, on this subject, Father White, one of these Jesuits, reports that when they set up this claim in Maryland, they were met by those who insisted that the laws of England, which bound the colony, forbade it. And he speaks of them as those, quote, who too intent upon their own affairs have not feared to violate the immunities of the church by using their endeavors that laws of this kind formerly passed in England and unjustly observed there may obtain like force here, to wit, that it shall not be lawful for any person or community, even ecclesiastical, in any wise, even by gift, to acquire or possess any land unless permission of the civil magistrates first be obtained. In other words, this is an impediment to the divine right of the church to possess land. And as a matter of fact, the whole goal of the papacy is to possess all the land and to claim himself the vicar of Christ, the divine right ruler of the whole world. The earth is mine and the fullness thereof. Okay? We started out this book, the papacy was having to fight to maintain control of the papal states. Then he had to fight to maintain control of all of Europe. Then he fought to maintain control of Britain. Now he's fighting to maintain control of the United States. You see how he's expanding his borders and setting his own jurisdictions? Now he's setting a jurisdiction in the colonies called Maryland. He's extending his jurisdiction over the United States of America. And he does this on the right that no civil power has any authority to set the jurisdiction of the Roman Catholic Church. Wherever a Roman Catholic foot, upon whatever land a Roman Catholic foot steps, the Pope claims jurisdiction. It began with the donation of Constantine. Now the donation of Constantine is relegated to the dustbins of history, and the Pope just simply says, I determine what my jurisdiction is, because I am the successor of Peter, and he is the vicar of Christ, and therefore I am the vicar of Christ, and the earth is mine and the fullness thereof. We've followed this progression of power from its earliest beginnings all the way to the present. And this is how the papacy operates. He says, which thing, when our people declared it to be repugnant to the laws of the church, 2 priests were sent from England to which who might teach the contrary. And then, in order to show his superior what admirable success he had in resisting this unjust English law, and how all-powerful the order had already become in America, that is, the Jesuit order, he continues, quote, but the reverse of what was expected happened. For our reasons being heard, and the thing itself being more clearly understood, they easily fell in with our opinion, and the laity in like manner generally, unquote. And thus the Jesuits won their first triumph in the United States. The 2 priests sent over from England, one of which was Andrew White, to demonstrate the necessity of obeying the English law, were easily converted. The laity were unresisting, The law was trampled under their feet, and they were allowed to acquire, hold, and govern their own property with impunity and without any responsibility to the civil power. In other words, they didn't have to obey any civil law. And that's the case with the Roman hierarchy today. It says that this is precisely the claim now set up by the American Roman Catholic hierarchy at the Second National Council at Baltimore, who have again revived, and upon the same soil, the old Jesuit demand for nearly 2 centuries and a half ago. From nearly 2 centuries and a half ago. He's talking about the current, we talked about it in an earlier chapter, the Second National Council at Baltimore. That the church has the right to own property, as much property as it wants, and every piece of that Roman Catholic property is an asylum, or rather an ambassadorship of the Pope of Rome. It's owned by the Pope. All Roman Catholic Church property is in effect owned by the Pope, and it comes under Roman Catholic canon law, not the civil law of the nation. That's what makes it an embassy. Okay? That's how Rome started out in this country. It gobbled up land. And whose land did they gobble up? The land owned by the heretics, the Virginian Protestants. They gobbled up the land of the heretics and put it under the use of the papacy, put it under the use of the Jesuits. I'm telling you, the Maryland colony started out the exact same way that it's going to end in this country. You're about to lose everything. That's what they intend to do. So says Pope Benedict XVI and the previous encyclical Rerum Novarum. Make no mistake, this country is being brought down for the purpose of destroying Protestantism and Protestants. I'll see you tomorrow on Inquisition Update.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.